Warhammer Age of Sigmar Stormground is the definition of a game that needed more time in development. Saying that it needs polish, though, feels like an understatement. This turn-based tactics game is just lacking or buggy in so many areas that the places where it does stand out are overwhelmed by the lack of quality elsewhere. What promising fundamentals its simple but well-designed combat has give way to a weakly organized roguelike campaign, a frustrating grind for new stuff, bizarre inconsistencies, and a lack of diversity and balance among its units.
Not again! The pain of my first immolation returns!
The world of Age of Sigmar is well represented here. It's a planar fantasy world with all kinds of outrageous, over-the-top concepts and a slurry of compound words like Stormcast and Maggotkin and Bladegeist and Realmgate and Stormvolt. It takes itself entirely too seriously, and is perhaps best if you can laugh at it. That's something Stormground generally understands, based on the pop culture homages and puns littered among the otherwise straight-faced dialogue. Stormground's strongest aspect is its basic game rules. They're simple mechanics that allow for a lot of interesting things to happen, yet remain fair and predictable. Units have health, movement, armor, and damage statistics. You rarely have more than 5 to 10 units to command, so things never become unwieldy. Units are vulnerable to quick death, but combat isn't too random. Each round, you spend power to summon units, and each round your power meter refills and grows a bit longer. As the battle goes on, you can summon your most expensive and powerful units, leading to a natural escalation. Unspent power becomes Aether, the currency spent to activate units' special abilities, which presents an interesting choice during every turn. Sometimes you'll summon new units, but sometimes you won't, as you'd rather allow your current troops to use their special powers next round. These vital powers can poison enemies, melt their armor, and knock them around the battlefield. None of this is particularly well balanced, mind you, and you might find multiplayer frustratingly unfair as a result, but you can build some combos that are fun to execute. Each of the factions does feel distinct and interesting from the other, though balance and which units are required to win is all over the place. The Stormcast Eternals are well-armored, hard hitters that rely on their commander to bring in new units. The Night Haunts are a swarm of ghosts that can pop up replacements as quick as you mow them down. The Maggotkin are something else entirely, focusing on corrupting the battlefield's terrain to make their enemies weak. If most of this sounds like a lot of clever and fun design, well, it is. It's pretty, and the basics are good. Everything else, though, is not good.
Tremble before me, servants of Sigmar!
In the campaign, Stormground's action itself is slow. Slow to go through dialogue, with conversations between characters lasting a minute despite only having 30 seconds of conversation.
And why would you do this, my so-called Fly Father?
Slow to resolve, with combat animations having no fast play options, so you're forced to watch every movement, including frequently hanging for 10 seconds before and after an order is given, both on your turn and the AI's turn. This is the least of the bugs that plague Stormground. I encountered numerous unit and weapon abilities that crashed to desktop every time I tried to use them, or simply didn't work. Effect animations and unit models frequently stuck around even when the ability that triggered them was over or the unit was dead. I'll also note that abilities are inconsistently implemented. Pushing enemies into terrain has a negative effect, sometimes as severe as instant death, but pushing enemies into trap abilities that you yourself laid doesn't trigger the trap. It's also just small stuff that lets Stormground down. There's clearly an elaborate system of keywords behind the rules, but there's no way to reference what those keywords are or mean. It's in desperate need of a rulebook and tooltips and just doesn't have them. Finally, though the roguelite campaign mode is nice in theory, it takes hours of grinding to unlock new powers, units, and abilities, and it really is grinding. The missions are very repetitive, and an overall lack of unit variety in the small faction roster means one campaign goes much like another. Once unlocked, you can only retain a handful of them from campaign to campaign, relying on random loot to give you interesting units mid-play. Adding insult to injury, you can't use unlocked stuff from campaigns in the multiplayer, or even the single-player skirmish versus AI, which you have to be online to use. It's a separate grind entirely to get new stuff for use in multiplayer. It took me 30 hours to win the campaigns on all 3 difficulties. I'll admit that I came up with some real cheesy strategies to do it. I'd conservatively estimate that it would take 100 or more hours of gameplay to unlock everything in either mode. That's not because there's so much interesting stuff to unlock, that's because Age of Sigmar Stormground is paced like a free-to-play mobile game. You get some cool stuff at first, but when you hit the grind wall, you hit it hard.
Yes, my child.
Age of Sigmar Stormground is a disappointingly mediocre tactical game. The bits of quality game design and pretty graphics that make up the core of it are overwhelmingly obscured by a frustrating single-player and multiplayer grind, then layered over by a thick paste of bugs, inconsistent rules, and an overall lack of content. Underwhelming, to say the least. For more Warhammer, check out our review of Necromunda Hired Gun, and for everything else, stick with IGN.
Our processions have created a fine union, my lady. But pray, whom do I have the honor of addressing?
I am the Lady of Ashes,